Greetings. Welcome to all of you on this rainy day, at least where I'm at here in Baltimore. Welcome to our Reconnect, Restore, Reimagine information session, not a town hall, but a NIPO session. And I'll explain why I'm getting to that point in just a second. I am Andre Riley, your Director of Communications, and I'm so happy that you're here with us tonight. Since we last met in person, a lot's happened in the school district and a lot's happened in our community with our health and safety guidance. We're going to talk a little bit about both tonight. First, health. Second, the Reconnect, Restore, Reimagine plan. So we're going to cover a lot of ground. Now, right now, we're scheduled to go about an hour or so, but I'll be honest with you. I know we have a lot of things to talk about, and I'm hopeful that you'll stay with us if we go past an hour. There's just, again, a lot to share. We're excited. School starts on August 30th. I think we're about 2.5 to 3 weeks away. So we're going to have a lot of good information tonight. And I need you to do a couple of things before we get started with the presentations. First of all, this is an information session, not a town hall. Typically, our sessions have been, we do a 5 to 10 minute presentation, then we do Q&A all the way through. This one's going to be a little bit different. We're going to have, because it's an information session, we're going to present information. However, we will stop at designated points and try to answer some things on screen. However, if you do have a question and you post it, whether you're visiting us on Facebook or YouTube, if you post it in the comments section, I've got staff members there, I've got team members there that will answer your questions in that space. So even if I don't ask your question to our panelists, we're going to try to answer it at that location. This will enable us to cover a little bit more ground, see some trends, and hopefully provide a better, more satisfactory experience. That being said, let's be civil on those comment sections. We're all here to learn and we're all here to exchange ideas. So let's be civil, let's welcome all different viewpoints, and at the same time, make sure we're sharing factual information. And again, we're going to break this event into 2 phases, starting with the discussion about our health and safety protocol. So I've got double duty tonight. I get to share my screen with you, in addition to being your MC. So before I go off screen, the next voices you will hear are members of our operations team. They will introduce themselves before they speak. And they're going to go over our health and safety protocol and what you can expect as we return to school on August the 30th. We'll pause at the end of their presentation and we'll try to answer some questions. But remember, if you submit them in the comments section, we will try to reply in that space. So I'm going to introduce, as I share my screen, the next voice will be Sharika. Hi, Sharika. How are you doing today?
Good evening, Andre. How are you?
I am fine. I'm looking forward to the great information you're going to share with my folks.
Well, good evening to everyone. My name is Sharika Bolden, and I work in the operations department. I've been supporting the development of our health and safety protocols for the last year or so. So I want to touch this evening on what we can expect for this coming school year. You will see a continuation of the strategies that we used last year with some adjustments to accommodate for this current school year. So first and foremost, face coverings will continue to be required indoors, no change with that. We will continue to maximize social distancing to the extent possible. And we will continue to employ symptom monitoring. Everyone will be asked to monitor their symptoms before they enter the building, just as we did last year. We will continue to use air filters and purifiers as part of our air quality approach. And our buildings will continue to be cleaned with EPA-approved products that fight COVID-19 specifically. We'll continue to do contact tracing to identify close contacts of any staff or students who test positive. Of course, we are encouraging vaccinations for all eligible people, and we will continue to implement COVID testing both symptomatic testing, if there's a situation that arises where there's a questionable situation and we want to understand what's happening behind that, those symptoms. And we will continue to do asymptomatic testing, where we are regularly testing students and staff. So as I said already, just as a reminder, masks are required indoors. And of course, we really understand that as we enter this school year, there's a shared responsibility for health and safety in our schools. And so families, just as we saw in the spring, will be required to sign a COVID awareness agreement that affirms that families for sure are agreeing to follow these protocols, wearing the mask, keeping students home when they're sick, and participating in our testing program. So one exception to the weekly COVID testing, vaccinated students do not need to participate in that weekly testing. So families are encouraged to submit their proof of vaccination to the enrollment officials at schools so that we have a clear record of who is vaccinated. And then finally, if there are family members who need to opt out of that COVID testing due to medical or religious reasons, they should notify city schools as well. And finally, I would like to highlight our full health and safety plan. I only touched on a few topics today and did not go in very much detail, but our full health and safety plan, we call it our SOP, is available on the website. It was just updated this week, so you can see the specific procedures for the fall. And so I would encourage everyone to visit the website and take a look at both the SOP, and then also on that page, there's a summary of kind of the high points if you're looking for a quick glance at what to expect for the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharika. I appreciate you, but don't go anywhere because I'm starting to see questions roll in. As a reminder, if you're just now joining us, we are going to talk about the Reconnect, Restore, Reimagine effort, and we are going to talk a little bit about the virtual learning program too. However, we want to start out sharing information about our health and safety protocols. We're receiving a lot of feedback from our different groups throughout the district. They just want to know what's going on, especially given some of the things that you're hearing on the news. So we thought we would tackle it first, and we'll see how it goes. And Sharika, speaking of, we got a number of questions. So I'm going to pose some to you, but feel free to call in some friends if you need to. Although I don't think she needs to, guys. She's pretty good at this stuff. Sharika, what about our special needs students? How's this mask mandate being implemented with them?
Great. So I will start off. I'm also just looking on the call for others who may want to join in. But generally speaking, I'll just mention that, our attempt, our vision is to make sure that the masking protocol is adhered to by everyone. If there is a student who needs an exemption or accommodation, there is a process to evaluate what that need is and figure out what the appropriate accommodation would be. So that process is available. It is referenced in the SOP as well.
Thank you, Sharika, for that. And we'll jump to another question that we've received. Will all classrooms have an air purifier? And what standard are they? What standard are those air purifiers? There's actually two questions.
Dr. Washington joining us.
Yes.
Hi, Andre.
Hi.
I'm going to help support Sharika with that question. So some of our schools will have air purifiers, and some of our schools are supported with an upgrade of MERV 13 filters. Those decisions are based off of the conditions of the building. So if the building is in a position where, or the building condition is in a place where it can receive an air MERV 13 filter, then all of those buildings will have the upgraded MERV 13 filters, which are finer filters in order to support us given the COVID-19. If it is a building that cannot, because of the age of the building, then those buildings will have air purifiers. And we can make sure that it's available on our website of what buildings were receiving MERV 13 filters and which ones are receiving air purifiers. And so they are HEPA air purifiers, which are upgraded air purifiers used in order to address airflow within the classroom spaces.
Thank you, Dr. Washington, for jumping in. Sharika, thank you. I'm going to call someone new to the screen because these next couple of questions are about COVID testing. And we've got an expert for that. We got experts for a lot of things in the district. Hi, James, how you doing? Can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Hello, everyone. My name is James Dendinger, and I am the interim director for COVID testing. I'm also the principal at Thomas Johnson Elementary Middle School. I'm serving dual roles right now.
Excellent, James. See, I told you, we got folks that are multi-skilled. I'm excited you're here to join us. I think this may be your first town hall with us, or second, I can't remember. We have a lot of events. But let's get to the questions, which are what people really want to know about. James, let's start with an easy one. Will all students in classrooms be notified of a positive COVID test?
Yes, so when there's a positive COVID, when a student tests positive for COVID, we will notify the school community.
All right, thank you. We've got a couple more questions related to testing, so let's plow through those. James, students that are fully vaccinated, the wording caught me up. If a student is fully vaccinated, can they still participate in the weekly testing?
Yes, so students who are fully vaccinated are not required to participate in weekly testing, but at the same time, if a parent can choose for their child to participate in weekly testing, even if they're fully vaccinated.
Excellent, thank you, James. All right, we've got one more related to our COVID testing and screening program. It appears that even though people are vaccinated, they can still test positive. Wouldn't it be more effective to mandate all kids to have COVID weekly testing? Now, that's kind of an opinion one, James. So go ahead.
It is, but we are all hearing about the breakthrough cases of COVID right now with the Delta variant, but it's still very unlikely that a fully vaccinated child or adult would contract COVID when exposed. So it's still unlikely. And for that reason, we are following CDC guidelines. The CDC guidelines are that it's not recommended for fully vaccinated children or adults to participate in screen testing.
All right, James, thanks a lot. Those are all the COVID testing questions. We're going to take one more health and safety question for right now. Sharika, can you come back to the floor with me? And James, you can turn your camera off. All right, Sharika, this has been a popular question that we've seen online and through emails. So I'm glad the person asked. How are children eating lunch? In the classroom or in the cafeteria? And I think that has to do with a whole lot with social distancing. So let's talk about it. How are they going to have lunch?
Right, so there's not one standard answer to that. That may vary by school just based on the parameters at that particular school. But the general guidelines behind how we are approaching meal times is that we are continuing to follow our prevention strategies during meal times as well. So the ventilation that we discussed earlier in this conversation still applies, distancing still applies. So those strategies may look slightly different from school to school, but those standard strategies are the ones that we will apply during meal times as well.
All right, I have a couple more questions. We actually received a few via email today, Sharika, so I'm just going to pose those to you. because I think they're all really good questions based on what folks want to know. Will we still do temperature checks for visitors to our buildings?
So we are not doing temperature checks this year. For visitors, we will still ask them to report their self-screening, but that will we will not physically be taking their temperatures this year.
Right.
And again, that's based on CDC guidance. They have completely removed temperature screening from their guidance this year.
That's excellent. Thank you, Sharika. I got two more for you, so hang in there with me. The next question is, will there be plexiglass barriers?
Great, another great question. So student desk shields have also been removed from the CDC guidelines. So those are not being required in classrooms this year either.
All right. And one more for you, Sharika. And again, if we don't answer your question live, we are not going to forget you. We're just going to answer it in the comment section where you submitted the question. That way we can answer many more questions, but not keep you here till about 10 o'clock tonight. And this is a big one, Sharika. Do families have to provide their own PPE, or do city schools have enough stock to provide PPE? And I guess that depends on the type of PPE you're asking for as well.
Right. So I mentioned at the start of this that face coverings are required, and so families should be prepared to send their students to school with a face covering. With a face covering that meets the district's guidelines, and those standards are listed in the SOP. But if there's a student or another person who comes to the building and they do not have one, we do have a backup supply available.
All right, Sharika, you have been great. We're about to proceed with the rest of the event. After I answer one more question, and I keep saying one more, but we're getting so many and I don't want to leave folks out. But this one's going to be for our chief of staff, Allison Perkins Cohen, who I meant to tell her I was going to ask her a question, but I didn't until this very moment. Allison.
That's okay. I'm ready for it. I'm ready.
Surprise, Allison. Hey, we're seeing this question a couple of times in regards to teachers being vaccinated. Mm-hmm. And we're being asked, are all of our teachers vaccinated? I think I know the answer, but you're the expert.
Well, I appreciate the question. So last time, we were currently actually doing another verification of vaccine numbers. Last time we asked staff for their vaccine numbers, which was in June. We had 78% of teachers were vaccinated. We'll have updated numbers in the end of this month. Right now, yes, so that is the current status of the percentage of vaccination.
Thank you, Allison. Nice and tidy. I appreciate you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Again, if we don't get to your question here on screen, we're going to answer it in the comments section. So my team will work together with our experts in the background, get the answers that we need. And hopefully those folks will answer here in the chat. And then we'll post those out in the public sphere. In the meantime, there is one that I want to tackle. What type of testing do we have for COVID-19 testings or screenings? You know what, James, can you come back and answer that one really quickly? About the type of testing that we have. I think that's an important one.
Yeah, we're expanding our testing in this upcoming school year compared to what we did in the spring. So for elementary students, we are using a test called Ginkgo by Concentric, and it's a nasal-based PCR test. So students self-administer the nasal-based swab. They do it themselves, and that's how we do it for elementary students. And then for the weekly screening for high school students and standalone middle school students, it's saliva-based PCR testing. So students drool into a tube, and that sample is taken and tested, and we get results back very quickly. Also, going forward into the upcoming school year, we will have symptomatic testing also. So if a student's feeling ill, we will test them to determine if they have COVID. And we use the Binax rapid test for that. And then we follow up also with Mako testing for that, for the symptomatic students.
Thank you, James. You've been great. Keep answering those questions in the chat so the team can get those out into the world. Now, we're going to transition to the second part of our event. We're going to talk about the Reconnect, Restore, Reimagine plan. This is our, not just reopening plan. We use that term simply to help you understand what it is. But this is a multi-year effort to explore, to take the lessons that we learned during COVID-19, some of those best practices and some of the places that we've grown to help our students have a better experience, to help better prepare them and to become better operationally. It's really, really exciting stuff. And it's so exciting, I'm bringing the big guns out. I'm bringing our Chief of Schools, John Davis, and our Chief Academic Officer, Joan Dabrowski. And they're going to come on camera in just a bit. And we're going to talk about the RRR plan. And then I'm going to share my screen and you all will get to see a very nifty presentation where we'll pause in the middle of it to talk about certain items. Joan, are you here and are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Joan, it's good to see you. The way Zoom pops up sometimes, it's like, oh, there's a person. All right, Joan, before we get started, there was a question about the virtual learning program and where we're at today in the virtual learning program. And I think it's just good to answer that question as we're coming off the previous discussion. So, Joan, we have a virtual learning program for a limited number of students that were successful in virtual learning last school year. And where are we at today?
Now, it's a great question. So we have closed that application. So we are having a virtual learning, as Andre mentioned, a virtual learning program. It really is a small program for a group of students who did really well in that virtual environment last year. So they thrived, and it was a space where they had strong attendance and a strong academic performance. And so we recognized, as we were thinking about our reimagining of what school might look like for some students, that a virtual experience might be something beyond the pandemic that could just be a way of being innovative of how we might think about it. So the tricky thing is right now, though, is that we know that there are some families who are nervous about where the virus is going right now. And so they're wanting to come into the virtual learning program, which really is a different space. It is not really there for the health and safety aspects that folks might be thinking about. It really is about a program tailored for a very specific kind of student, because at the end of the day, what we know is that the majority of our students, most students, will be best served by coming back in person. And as I think we've gone through already this evening, the detailed and methodical work of making sure our schools are safe to welcome students back in person, the mitigation strategies we have in place, the mask wearing, the hand washing, the distancing, the air filtration, all of these things represent a safe return to in-person learning. So at this point, our virtual learning program is at capacity. We will be letting those applicants who are, we are currently going through and making final decisions. We expect to be able to send those out early next week. You should hear no later than the August 20th of if your student is eligible for it or not. So I do want to just emphasize that at this point, the virtual learning program is at its capacity. And those applications are being reviewed and finalized. And by end of next week, folks will know whether or not their student will be enrolled into that program.
Thank you, Joan. Great synopsis. And I'm going to ask you the most plain question, just so all hearts and minds are clear. On August 30th, do we expect that most of our students will return in person?
Yes, we do. And we are so looking forward to that return. We have been working throughout the summer with our school leaders. They are so excited, our principals, our teachers will be coming back very soon, and we're excited to welcome everybody back.
Excellent. Thanks, Joan. Before we go to RRR, I just think that's an important point. Folks are hearing a lot of things out there. And they're like, are you still going to have in-person learning? Yes, we will have in-person learning. And you heard it from someone who would know. So we're going to go from there. All right, Joan, I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint and then we are going to go through a few slides, pause a little bit, and go through a few more slides. Here we go. I'm going to, oh, that didn't work out. All right, Joan, here we go.
Well, actually, I'm going to toss it over to my colleague, Chief John Davis. He's going to get us started.
Oh, even better. Hi, Chief Davis.
Hey, Andre, how are you?
I'm fine and dandy. I'm glad you're here to join us. And I'm just going to pull up to the first slide and you tell me when you need to go to the next slide, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I want to start off by saying is this whole plan, there really isn't a slide about the engagement work that occurred from April, May, June, July, but there were so many touch points with our families, with our teachers, with our students. I think the number was over 40,000, if I'm not mistaken, that really led us to this final plan. And if anyone on this call was a part of it, I just want to send an incredible appreciation to them so that we can get to this point. I know there's a lot of questions about health and safety, and there will continue to be. But once students come back and once August 30th begins, we want that day and we want our school year to start in such a strong and productive way. As Joan Dabrowski said, right, as we are working with our principals, what we're hearing loud and clear is they are so excited to see students and to welcome their community back into the school and start things up the way they know how. As we talk about this plan, it really ended up being developed into 3 sections: a preconditions section, an overarching commitment section, and key strategies. And again, a lot of this is what we heard from our community. So let's get going. Preconditions, right? I'm not going to emphasize the health and safety. We just spent the first 25 minutes or so going into it. I'm just going to say that we in Baltimore City have been not just statewide leaders, but nationwide leaders in the way that we've done testing appropriately and the way that we've held really high standards. And as the CDC has learned more information about the virus, we have adjusted appropriately, no matter if it's around facility improvements or how we space our students or how the day is going to ensue. I have a lot of confidence based on everything that's happened in the last 16 and 17 months where we've adjusted appropriately. And so I'm just going to say that I am honored to work with our operations folks, with our health and safety folks in the way our schools have implemented it, so that really on August 30th, it is a safe and healthy, productive environment. Let's keep going. The next preconditions is around connectivity and technology support, right? And this area, right, has had the greatest amount of change in the last 16 or 17 months. And we will continue to make sure that we can offer T-Mobile and Comcast internet where we can. But I'll tell you, our ITD team has already been installing additional Wi-Fi access points. So as more students come in, right, our schools are better equipped. But in the end, we know that, right, we brought back students in the spring, but there's going to be even more that come back in the fall. So all of that is really going to be important. And there's been a lot of work in the background that has gone into it. The devices that we've provided so students can continue the benefit from virtual learning, again, is just something that has gone really 0 to 100 in the last 16 months, and that will continue. So those 2 areas are precondition areas, and we're going to make sure that those continue to be in place.
Chief Davis, we want to pause for a second. I just want to see if there are any questions that have been elevated to us. It doesn't seem like there have been. So we'll just keep going, and at our next pause, if there are questions that folks have about Triple R, we'll pick them up then, okay?
That's right. Again, the preconditions, those things had to be in place, but there were some overarching commitments that are a little bit different than the strategies, because these commitments are going to proceed throughout a lot of our strategies. So we'll quickly go over those. The first one is elevating student voice, and not just from the standpoint of kind of normal school where you want to elevate student voice, but we just saw a lot of different opportunities in the virtual world. And frankly, when there was unrest and racial violence in our country over the last 16 months, where we provided opportunities, teachers provided opportunities for students to really voice their concerns and make sure that they can impact their school in a really, really positive way while being honest about what's on their mind and being very authentic about it. We've got to continue that in so many different ways. Again, a lot of it was done virtually, but when you hear students' voices and when you see them step up in different leadership ways, that is a big, big part of what school is about. And we are committed. It is an overarching commitment to continue to elevate that voice. As we get to the second one, I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Dabrowski to talk about our other three overarching commitments.
Thanks, Chief Davis. So as we thought, about our work coming back together, centering it into equity was a natural space for us to land, knowing that we believe as a community about the importance of access across all of our schools to the programming resources we have. And so as we are receiving this unprecedented amount of federal funding and support, we have a moment right now to really address some of the inequities, the disinvestment of particular areas or schools or resources across our city. And so that has been one of the guiding principles in this 3R work. It's also a moment, it has been a moment for us to really step back and look at some of our policies and practices that have disproportionately impacted our students of color. And so where we have a chance to reimagine and reprioritize how we go about our work, this has been a critical part of our planning. There's also this space too of honoring culture, experiences, and humanity in a moment that this pandemic has shook all of us to our sort of center and core. So this has been, I think, a moment of real importance for us in our equity work, and we're fortunate to have a very strong policy that helps guide us in this work. And certainly the work of building our staff capacity to do this work as well as teachers, and so that we can bring this work into teaching and learning. So family and community engagement, as Chief Davis said earlier, the opportunity to plan for this Reimagine moment happened through a wide scale engagement effort and hearing from our families, hearing from our community. And what we've learned in this pandemic is how we go about that two-way communication with our families is so incredibly important. And so we have just done incredible work to get feedback and input from our students, our families, our community partners. We've been using surveys, we've been using posit polls where you get your text where a quick answer comes in, and we've had focus groups. And I think sessions like this, where we're able to get our word out and the communication out, and we know that this is something that we need to continue to do as we bring students back. So again, we're excited about the work of this engagement. And again, we want to develop our staff capacity to do this work well. So again, you'll see some of that work when we talk about student learning plans in just a moment. But again, family community engagement is a really important commitment for us. And then the last one here, as we were working together on our plan, we know that our educators have gone through a remarkable period of challenge and complexity. And time again, they have risen to that challenge and have done incredible work in service of our students. And so as we think about bringing teachers back, we know that there will be important professional learning for our students, for our staff in service of our students. So again, we want to make sure we're listening to our teachers, hearing what they need, making sure they have some voice and choice in their professional learning. And it's something that you see throughout our plan.
All right, Joan, we're going to pause just for a second. We're making really good time, and we're also seeing a few questions. Some of them are health and safety, and some of them are about the RRR plan. So I'll start with the question about equity, and then we'll pass it back to the health and safety experts. How's that sound? Sounds great. All right, Joan, let's get to it. When you speak of equity, are there more specific examples about our work?
That's a great question. I'm going to add some, and then I certainly would defer to other colleagues as well who may want to jump in. So I'll use one example as we think about an opportunity to expand learning time for students or offer tutoring for students. We are looking closely at which students need that, and we're using information to determine those decisions around how we prioritize tutoring or extended learning opportunities for those students who we know have learning gaps, and we can use criteria to make those decisions. Similarly, we also have an opportunity to increase our access to advanced course offerings. So one of the things you'll see in our plan is that we have made intentional efforts to increase middle school advanced math options. And we can do this in a virtual setting. Again, right now, there are some students who are eligible and who would be ready to take an advanced math class, but their school, because of either staffing or the size, might not be able to offer it. So using this opportunity in a virtual space, we can actually offer some virtual advanced 6th and 7th grade math classes and get our students ready for 8th grade algebra, which is a really important milestone in that math journey, if you will. And so that opportunity to widen access is another example around, again, how we're providing that equity lens to our work. But I know there's other colleagues here who may want to chime in as well about our work in this area.
Yeah, I'll add to that, Dr. Dabrowski. One area that I know we are going to prioritize is as we hire additional social workers, for instance, we are going to look at schools that have struggled the most and where students have struggled the most with virtual learning in the past year and a half. Right, we wish there were so many social workers that we could flood all of our schools and have so many more, but as we get more on board, right, it'll be the schools that need it the most in an equitable way that get that resource. And those are the types of decisions we have to make on a school by school, student by student basis, and we'll continue to do so.
Thank you both. Guys, we're going to pause here on the Triple R plan. We're starting to see a pretty big uptick in our health and safety questions that we didn't see when we first started going through Triple R. So let's pause here, Chief Davis and Chief Dabrowski. You can go into the background for a little bit. We'll come back and finish this presentation. But for right now, let's answer some health and safety questions. Okay, so we're going to pick an easy one for my health and safety team. Sharika, can you come back to the forefront for me?
Hello, this is Nicole Stewart from Operations. So Sharika is actually taking care of something she needed to take care of, but the rest of the operations team is here to answer questions.
All right, it's good to see you, Nicole. Can I pose this first question to you, and then we'll get it around to the right person to answer it. How's that sound?
Good.
All right, the first question, what has changed in our reopening plan now that the Delta variant is here?
So that's a very broad question.
Mhm.
Let's see. So I'm not sure if Lynette or Monique want to jump in around anything regarding cleaning, but it is quite a broad question, Andre.
I agree. So let's try to trim it down before we just pass the ball. All right. When it comes to our planning for back to school, are we making adjustments to the guidance that we're getting from the CDC regarding the Delta variant? Are we monitoring what the experts are telling us?
So absolutely, as Sharika mentioned previously, we are taking into consideration what those updates from the CDC include. We do understand that, that it is very mutable right now. And so we're monitoring. Sharika is, as well as the other folks involved in these discussions and decisions, are monitoring those changing guidance information from the CDC, and then updating the SOP appropriately. And so as Sharika mentioned on Friday, the most recent version of the SOP was released and updated on the website, and that will continue to be a living document that gets updated as guidance changes.
All right, thank you, Nicole.
Andre, would you like me to add to that?
Yes, please, feel free, James.
So I just also want to add that we have a team of people from central office who meet regularly with the Public Health Advisory Committee. And that Public Health Advisory Committee is made up of doctors from Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland, Morgan State University. So we have we meet with that committee bi-weekly, and we will continue to do so throughout the year and adjust our plans as necessary.
Right, thanks, James. Chief Perkins Cohen, I have a question that's it's an offshoot of what we just answered, but I think it's important. The decision to come back in person, that's not just solely city schools making that in a vacuum, correct?
No, that's correct. Like all school systems in the country are moving in the direction of coming back or are coming back. We obviously follow the guidance from the state Department of Education as well. But I think what we have all learned over the last year, while schools were out in large scale numbers for the pandemic, is that the health and implications for students to be out of school and to miss school over the last year, pediatricians, medical professionals, and school and educational experts all agree that the negative impacts, the health impacts for students being home deeply outweigh the risks of being in person. Schools are safe places. The positivity rates in schools, schools have not been places of transmission. We just have not seen that in schools across the country. That has been true across the country in schools that have many less mitigation strategies than we do. We have had all 5 CDC mitigation strategies in place. Plus we've had the air filtration systems updated to meet ASHRAE standards. Plus we've done the symptomatic and asymptomatic testing. And we have the benefit of, since we've done all that testing, that we know what our positivity rates were at our schools because we tested so frequently. So for this summer, I'll give you the most recent data. For this summer, we tested 6,400 high school students. There's a different test, Andre, for high school and elementary. So I'm giving you 2 different numbers here. But we tested 6,000 students this summer for high school. The positivity rate for our high schools was 0.2%, 0.2% positivity rate. So very low. For our elementary schools, we tested 17,000 students, and our positivity rate for high schools was 0.0003%. So our schools have been safe places. They remain safe places. We have really put everything in place to make sure that they're remaining that way. That's why we talk to our health and safety advisors regularly to get their input and to interpret the CDC guidelines. And just one last piece is that, recently the CDC changed its guidelines to require masks indoors. We were still with masks indoors. We've been doing that all summer. We tend to be on the side of being cautious with regards to this health and safety standards. And that's when we had kept in place. And so we were already ready when they said that to put masks on indoors. We were already doing that.
Thank you, Chief Perkins Cohen. And thanks for sharing that data because that's important. We're not guessing. We're using data and we're proving what we're doing works. It's just a scary time, but we appreciate the questions. James, can you come back to the floor for me? I've got another question for you. James, what happens if someone at one of our schools contracts COVID? And we are able to identify it?
Yeah, so like I said, we do the weekly testing, and when we identify a positive case, that student will quarantine. That student is the positive case is also referred to the Office of Human Capital, and Human Capital immediately begins contact tracing to identify any close contacts. And those close contacts will also be quarantined for 10 days.
Okay, so that goes back to a question that we're seeing a lot of. What happens will we have to close schools? If someone gets COVID, we will test them and we'll quarantine appropriately.
Exactly. We do not. We want to minimize the amount of time that students are out. So we're going to be looking very carefully at which students were close contacts, and we'll quarantine those students. So the students who are positive cases of COVID and close contacts. Of course, we will be paying very close attention to the conditions of a school, and if cases start rising, then we could need to make decisions to perhaps close a whole pod or whole homeroom of students. But we absolutely will be striving to identify close contacts and positive cases.
Thank you, James. Dr. Washington, can you come to the floor? I'm seeing variations of the same question related to social distancing and how we're going to set up classrooms. So will we be able to set up classrooms to create adequate space for social distancing?
Yeah, and so one of the things we're doing is we're following the CDC guidance, right? So the CDC guidance is recommending 3 feet, or if you cannot do 3 feet, if 3 feet is not possible, then you continue with the layer of other protections, including the mask, the hand washing, and ensuring you have the appropriate ventilation. And so that is exactly what we're doing in our classroom spaces, and spaces in classrooms where they can't comply with 3 feet distancing. We're ensuring that students are still using all of the other layers of protection against COVID-19.
You're on mute, Andre.
Yep, every now and then it catches me too. Dr. Washington, while desk shields are no longer required, will folks be able to request them? Can a family say, hey, I would like my student to have a desk shield? It would just make me feel more secure.
So again, those are some things can happen on a school level basis. If a parent requests desk shields from a principal, we do have some that are still in our inventory in order to provide it. Particularly also, I think that I saw a note in the chat where it was for a special need or a special situation. So yes, we definitely can provide desk shield for that purpose.
All right. And Dr. Washington, I'm going to pose this to you, but I'm not certain, you may not be the right person to answer, but I'll start with you. What do we define as close contact? And this is a very interesting discussion because it's happening at the federal level for us.
Right, and so I might not be the appropriate person to talk about close contact. Can you give more context in terms of when you mean, what do you mean by close contact?
I guess the person's asking, how do we define what is a close contact? What makes one student a close contact of another?
Okay, so Allison is coming on, so I'm gonna turn that question to Allison.
Sure. It takes a team effort with all these questions. There's so many different aspects of this that's why we have all different people working on this. So for a close contact, the CDC guideline is that it's somebody who you've been within 6 feet of for 15 minutes or more during a 24-hour period. So our contact tracers, so one of the CDC mitigation strategies is contact tracing, and we do contact tracing. So when a student, when we have an individual in a school who tests positive, we do contact tracing to ascertain who are the individuals who fit that CDC definition of a close contact, so that those individuals will quarantine as well.
Thank you, Chief Perkins-Cohen. You're right, yeah, there's a lot of different aspects, and I'm glad we have a team to answer them. Chief Perkins-Cohen, this one might be for you, at least as a starting point. How often will updates be given to parents regarding COVID testing? This might be a James one too. How often will we notify parents about COVID testing and positive results? Weekly, monthly?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So we will, as James mentioned, if there is a positive case at a school, the school community will be notified of that, because we know that schools really, people want to know what's happening in their own child's school. I want to know what's happening in my own child's school. So that is something that you'll hear about that. I think it's a good question about how we will track the testing results. Andre, probably you and I need to talk about this a little bit. We had a dashboard last year that we put together. I feel like there might be better ways to present that information now, but before, as you recall, Andre, we were tracking the number of positive cases, the number of people tested, or the number of days in person, and then any transmissions, which we've always had a very, very low number of transmissions. But we should probably think about that again, Andre, and think about whether that's the right way to show data or how we should, because I think the parent question or the community member's question is right here, is that this is information people want to know so that they can gauge for their own family kind of where we are.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll definitely have to sit down, guys. See, even when we're on camera, we're always trying to find ways to do better. And the current dashboard is still on our health and safety page. Well, I'm calling it current. It's last year's data. So if you really want to go back and see how we performed, it's still there for you. But we're going to find the best way to make certain that you're well informed. But we will tell you at the school level, if something happens, you'll get a direct notification from us. We're not going to leave you out there. All right. Thanks. Thanks, Allison. I appreciate you. Now, Chief Davis and Chief Dabrowski, can you come back? Because we actually have a number of questions before we try to finish the Triple R presentation. I just want to hit a few high notes. So let's ask a few questions and we'll get back to the end of the presentation. Chief Davis, how much financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and civics will be taught?
I believe that is embedded in our curriculum in a number of different points. I have to be honest that I don't remember the exact spots now or the exact grades. I want to say there was a middle school grade, like maybe 7th and then one in 11th. So we have done a review of financial literacy. Joan or maybe someone else might know that a little bit better than I, but I know that it is in there. I'm just unsure of the details.
Yes, no, go ahead. Thanks, Chief Davis. So sure, we have financial literacy experiences for our students at key moments in their development. So we do have an upper grade elementary at 5th grade. As Chief Davis mentioned, we also have one in middle school, and then it comes back again in 11th grade as well. And so multiple points. And then as well, in some of our CTE work, our career technology, technical work, we have places there where aspects of, I think, entrepreneurship, literacy, financial literacy, all sorts of financial questions related to one's sort of career journey are infused into the courses. So Dr. Rachel Pfeiffer, who oversees our college and career readiness, really has taken into account a lot of the state guidance of where we need to be for financial literacy, working with our state standards for that and aligning the work of CTE to fit that as well. So very excited about the work we're doing in that area.
All right. Chief Dabrowski, Chief Davis, great. Now let's, we got a little bit more to go in our presentation, then we'll see where the evening takes us. How's that sound? All right, let me pull it back up. All right, we're in the strategy section.
All right. Great. So as we jump back into some of our work around Reconnect, Restore, Reimagine, we're going to highlight sort of 5 big strategies that we're thinking about as we welcome our students back this fall. We're going to talk about wellness, school, and school culture and climate, personalized learning, acceleration, reimagining time for our students, and expanding the enrichment and academic opportunities. So those are the 5 strategies. I just want to say that even in this image, you'll see that there's the overlap because these strategies connect to each other. And so as Chief Davis and I walk through some high-level points on them, you'll see where there's some connection between them. Go ahead, Chief Davis.
Absolutely. Our schools for the past about 2 months have been planning appropriately for a school climate and culture where we are focused on building relationships that frankly have just been different in the virtual space. We know that once we get back into school, students, young people have to get back into the routine. And so ensuring we've got a welcoming, vibrant school where, again, there's activities that build relationships between student to student, but then also adults to students is really important. Additionally, right, we're also making sure that everyone is aware of what the mental health resources are within our schools. There are social workers, psychologists in schools, but sometimes they're not known. And when students present different situations, we want to make sure that they know exactly where to go. You can see one of the points here is also not just about knowledge and knowing where to go, but we're working to add additional clinicians where we can, again, with schools that have struggled the most. Again, that aligns with our equity work when we look at students in schools that have struggled the most. Lastly, first, I'm always going to be focused on students, but we also have to have activities for our teachers as well. Last year, we had Be Well activities through our Human Capital Office that were very well received, and we'll continue that around staff wellness. And Dr. Dabrowski will take us through the next three.
Yeah, so great. So personalized learning, we're so excited as our kids come back this fall that we have this moment to really step back and reconnect with them by getting to know them as individual human beings and to really learn about how they're doing, how they're feeling about being back, hear about what they're excited about, what their hopes and dreams are for the school year, and also hear from their families. So reaching out to parents to say, what do you want us to know about your student? What are their strengths? Where are areas that you really want us to make sure we support them this year? We also want to do some important assessing to see where there may be learning gaps. We know that a number of our students experienced interruptions in their learning and have unfinished work and learning to do, or have some credits they need to earn. And so as we come back together, we're going to be offering this moment of really digging into this personalized learning plan so that we can then provide sort of this roadmap for how we're going to support their academic year ahead, as well as Chief Davis just said, that social, emotional, and wholeness part of their journey too. We're excited that we're going to be able to have more opportunities for tutoring. We've learned a lot about how we can organize for tutoring, the right kinds of tutoring programs that get good results for kids, how often that happens, who the tutor is. And so we're excited that we'll have more tutoring programs in our schools, and our goal is to have a tutoring partner in every building. So really excited about that. We've talked already about the virtual learning program, but I do want to say again, it's a very small program, really looking at a student who thrived last year in the experience, who had strong academic performance and really strong attendance, and had an opportunity to engage in ways that they weren't engaging when we were in person. And so that program will be launched as a space for us to reimagine what a fully virtual program might look like. And then last but not least is this big topic called acceleration. And what that means really and truly is that we want to help our kids catch up quickly. We know, again, that there are gaps that students might have in some of their learning. And so we want to make sure that as we prepare for their return, we are ready to make decisions about what is most important and give the supports that students need to hit on grade level learning. And this feels really important to us because historically what we do is when we see that a student might not have a skill or something solid in terms of their learning, we do what we call remediate. We hold them back, or we give them we give them tasks that are below their grade level, and they never catch up. And their peers keep going forward and they keep falling further behind. So we're really trying to make this moment a moment where we look forward, where we help kids get what they need through tutoring, through more time together in small groups so that they can hit that grade level learning. You can go to the next slide, please. So again, when we talk about acceleration, it really is about prioritizing what is most important on grade level and making sure that we keep students on track with their peers. So again, what you can expect when your student comes back is that we're going to be assessing to see where there might be some learning gaps. We're going to use structures like tutoring and small groups to get them ready for some lessons so that when that important lesson of 4th grade math comes, they're ready to hit it. And I think that's, again, an important part of our work as we welcome students back. And so again, in order to do the work of more personalized learning. And in order to accelerate, we have to step back and look at how we use time in school. So as your students come back, you can expect to see that how we use time in the day is going to look different. You'll see that there's time every day for what we call personalized learning. So students working on what they need in terms of their academics or some of their social emotional work to really be on track to thrive. You'll see that at our secondary, we want to provide more pathways for how students can learn about college, careers, the opportunity to shadow some of our CTE programs, to know what their options are, and to provide supports to help them make those decisions. As Chief Davis mentioned, our commitment around wholeness and wellness means that we want to have time in the schedule for what we call advisory, which are spaces where kids can go and be with a caring adult who's there to check in to see how they're doing, where there may be some challenges for them in a class, or maybe there's something going on with friends or peers and they want some help. But that community building time is so critical. And so having time in the schedule for that every day, every week is one of the ways we are reimagining time. We know that our students, in order to be ready for college and career, need high quality literacy and language skills to be solid. And so as we look forward, we're excited that we're going to be more intentional to make sure our kids have the language skills they need to engage in secondary coursework. So that's another important part of it. And then the last piece here is we're so excited about the work that we've been doing this past summer. The last couple of months, we have served more students in city schools with city programs than in recent years. And we're just thrilled with how much engagement and excitement there has been of our students being back in person this summer. So we're looking forward to expanding that both at the K-8 and at the high school level.
And our fifth key strategy is really around working to expand our arts and athletic opportunities. The first thing we did in this space is make sure that some of our schools, usually they were the smaller schools that only had a half-time arts position, had full-time arts position. That's something we've been wanting to do for a while. So as we had some additional funding, we made sure that we did that. We're also going to work with our partners, frankly, both in arts and athletics, to provide more opportunities. And arts, it's going to be around music, visual arts, theater, dance, and around athletics, right? If it is in the elementary and in the younger grades, we want to work definitely on skill development. But as you get a little bit older, we want to make sure that even if you're not playing on, say, the regular high school team, that there are intramurals, there are clubs, there are additional opportunities. Because there's just a whole lot of young people that might want to play sports, but maybe they didn't make the team, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have some of those opportunities. We also think we can offer more camps and just more structured activities for students that we know are going to hook them in school just as much, if frankly, more so than the academic part. So we're committed to this, and we're going to make sure that we use our resources, and we also use our partners because they want to help. And Andre, I kind of want to throw two more things out there before you add or go to more questions. One of them is, even though we just talked about key strategies and we talked about the plan, I want folks to know that this is really a 2, 3, probably even longer than a 3-year plan. And we're going to have to keep coming back to the community and hearing what is working and what they know and what they don't. If we come back and a child is struggling and they've never heard of tutoring, but we know it's in the school, then we're going to have to figure out and understand what that means, right? Same thing with the culture and climate. Same thing with any of those academic opportunities. And so please be on, I mean, I know it's only a couple of weeks before school, so a lot of people are now energized, but I'd ask for people to be energized throughout the year and give us as much feedback as possible, because we're going to have to shift in the upcoming year. This is the plan to begin with. This is what we heard from our community, but we know we're going to have to make changes because that's always how it is. We want to make those changes with people. We want to make those changes with the voices that we hear. The second thing, Andre, I want to point out, and you might have some thoughts about this. I feel like whenever there is a town hall like this, there's always some people that have been trying to get a hold of us. And for whatever reason, we have not called back or we have not been as responsive as we could. I'm always willing to give out my email address, which is jldavis at the long BCPS string. But I don't know if there are other ways as well. I saw some folks in the chat, I think a Miss Johnson and a Miss Ochoa, who, right, were trying to get some information and no one was responding. I mean, I literally, when I walked out the building yesterday, right, there was a parent that was having a hard time reaching the school. I took their number, I sent it to the principal, right? And this is not an exaggeration, the principal just emailed me back and they're getting a hold. So like one way or another, right? Sometimes we have to say no. Sometimes we might not be able to answer it the way that our folks want, but we have to be responsive. And so I feel like whatever the communication is, we got to give out, Andre, we should do that right now.
And that is a good call. So we're going to start with the easiest thing that we can do. Communications team who are monitoring our different accounts, please put our inbox address in those chats, communications@bcps.k12.md.us. When we get that information in our central inbox, then we're able to forward it to the right parties. So instead of giving you 9 different email addresses, I can assure you that if you send it to that communications@bcps.k12.md.us, we can gather it and send that information to the parties that need it. And I'm being told that my team has been doing that throughout the event, so they're really good at what they do, and I appreciate their hard work. But Chief Davis, I do agree with you. There's just a lot of questions out there. I'm watching different conversations on Facebook, even while you guys are presenting, and I'm seeing some of those now. So let's try to answer some questions, and we'll work on the responsive part as we get more, probably tomorrow. So we'll start with the easy. Well, these aren't easy, but these are good questions. Let me circle back because I had it, but it got pushed down. Chief Davis. Actually, no, these are for you or for Chief Dabrowski. But Chief Washington, this is definitely a question for you. And it goes back to an ongoing question for us. Will schools ensure that basic hygiene products are in students' restrooms at all times during the school day?
Yes. So very good question. There are a couple of things that we at district office are pushing in order to support and work with schools. A couple of things that are on the website for our general public just to pull and see how these things are going to be happening in schools. So the first thing is that schools will have the appropriate items such as hand soap and some of those different things like that. We also have on the website a checklist for custodians and the things that they should be doing to be responsive to ensure that all of bathrooms have the appropriate hand soap and also paper towels. So they should be frequently monitoring and checking to make sure that this happens.
Right, thank you. Chief Davis, this question is for you, this next one. If a student has to quarantine, how will they make up their work? Would this impact their attendance? Or Chief Dabrowski, you can always jump in as well if you'd like.
So I'm happy to jump in, and it is work that Chief Davis and I are doing together across offices. We know that there will be moments where a student may have to quarantine. It may be that they're symptomatic. It may be that they're asymptomatic. First and foremost, if a student needs to quarantine and they are symptomatic and they're not feeling well, the most important thing for them is to get better in their health, right? So we really want to emphasize that we don't want a student to feel the pressure of doing school and learning while they're also perhaps not feeling great. If a student's asymptomatic, we are right now looking at ways to support their learning and that are both meaningful for the student and meaningful and not disruptive for the whole class. Because what we learned in hybrid this past year was that having students partially on Zoom and partially in person was challenging for everybody. Our students at home struggled to access, our students in the classroom struggled to sort of access their learning. So we are working with schools to think through how we can have a series of lessons and learning for a student who needs to quarantine, and while still having some live check-ins with teachers in their building at their school. So we're going to work through this. This is really complex, and we know it's of utmost importance that we minimize interruptions of learning, and we want to prevent a student from falling behind or missing too much. So we are really going to work with schools to make sure that students can get what they need to stay connected, have live touches with teachers while also working on some things independently.
Thank you, Chief Dabrowski. Thanks for jumping in. You guys will be back here soon, very soon, but I got some other health related questions and I want to jump in on those as well. Chief Perkins Colin, I want to use you as a starting point, if you don't mind, for this next question I'm seeing. And if you're not the right person, we'll find the right person to talk about it, okay?
Do my best, Andre.
Thank you. I need someone to point me in the direction to talk about my student who has underlying health issues and shouldn't be attending school. So the question for us would be, if a student has underlying health conditions and a parent is uncomfortable with their student attending in-person learning, what would be their options?
So the main option would be a home and hospital. So I'm going to phone a friend and have Joan help me on this too. But I think the main option would be so if a student has issues where they are unable to attend school, then we are using our home and hospital program to provide education to that student. So I don't know as well as I'm sure Joan does what that looks like, but that is the general answer. Can you support me, Joan?
I'm happy to. So yes, our home and hospital program, which is a program that has been in existence even before COVID-19, has always been a space where those students who may have immunocompromised systems or medical fragile conditions that prevent them from being able to be in the building receive their services, they receive their education through this program. We have someone who manages that program through our school wellness and wholeness area. And so that will be the space, and we can get that information to families if they need that.
All right, thank you both. See, this is great. Yeah, that's a question that someone didn't feel like we were answering, and I want to make certain that we answered it. Let's jump into another one. Well, we've already answered this one. If a child tests positive, will the entire classroom be notified? The answer is yes, we will. Let's see what else we have. So a lot going on here. Oh, Chief Dabrowski and Chief Davis, here's the question that I lost a little bit earlier. Sorry, we got a pretty busy chat. How do we engage with SLP at the school level?
Is the question, how are parents going to engage?
I guess I don't know who we is in this context.
Right.
Parents. I'll pick my parents because that's who we're serving.
Yeah, I think ultimately, right, the student learning plan will be something that should be co-created with parents based on what the child's needs are and what they've gone through in the past 16, 17 months. Sure, there's going to be academic parts to this, what are child's strengths, what are child's weaknesses, but what we're also doing is making sure there's personalized time in the day. And as Dr. Dabrowski said, for some students, there will be time after school as well, so that if a child is behind, especially by a couple of grade levels or more, they've got that additional time. But what a parent should see is by the end of that first quarter, there should be some engagement with their teacher and with their school on this student learning plan, right? There should be a conversation about what it's been like for the past 16 or 17 months, how their child has been doing. Are there things that we can do at the school site? Are there any resources that we can provide, either through the social worker, through maybe the counselor? But really, it's a conversation to make sure that we're meeting the needs. we're giving ourselves through the first quarter to have these conversations, because honestly, for a school, it's going to take time to have them. And eventually that student learning plan will be a combination of the academic needs of a child. But frankly, we've got a lot of kids on grade level too. So if they're on grade level, then what can we do to continue to promote their success? So it's really a combination of teacher, parent, what is best for the child, and really individualized as much as we possibly can.
All right, thank you, Chief Davis. Stay with me. This next one may be yours. What are some of the strategies the district will be implementing around attendance and truancy? Again, I'm not certain that's yours, but I just thought I'd start with you.
Sure. I mean, I think the first thing is, right, this whole summer, every school has had at least one attendance liaison, if not a team of people that have been calling students and calling families, just to make sure that they are ready for August 30th. And especially if they've struggled with attendance online, know that we're going to be back in person and be ready for August 30th and start to answer their questions. This has started about maybe, I would say about 6 or 7 weeks ago. And every school had this extra resource, and they picked people in their school that had great relationships and really went after this with their families. Again, to make sure that by August 30th, the students that have been struggling with attendance would know exactly what to expect. And if there were issues that have arisen that we can help with, to make sure we get to that.
Right, and Chief Davis, what's your email address again?
It's JLDavis
at bcps.k12.md.us. There's someone who wanted to ask you a follow-up question. You shared your email, so I'm glad you're able to share it again.
No problem.
All righty. Chief Washington, can you come back to the floor, please? Here's one that we've answered a few times, but you want to say these things again to make certain everybody's hearing the same message. Will frequently touched surfaces be cleaned daily?
Yes. And one of the things I would reference back to on our website, where we have all the information about what custodians' responsibilities or roles are during this period of time. There is a schedule of how frequently custodians should be cleaning certain areas within the building. And also some of those various surfaces sit within those various spaces, such as bathrooms and cafeterias, and some of those different areas. So yes, high touch point areas will be frequently cleaned and go to disinfected by custodians.
Thank you much. All right, Chief Dabrowski, can you come back to the floor? We have a couple of questions about the virtual learning program. Now, this one's not really a question, but it's a concern. Do we think we're giving families enough time to, between getting notified by August 20th and school starts on the 30th? Is that enough time to help families get prepared?
So we know that the timeline is tight. We did extend our application window by several weeks because we wanted to provide plenty of opportunity for families to apply to the program. And so we are working really very hard to go through our applications, determine eligibility, and get those notification letters out. We're hopeful it will be before next Friday, the 20th, but we do know that we want to be thorough in our screening and make sure we are looking at a student's full application before making those decisions. So we don't want to rush it. And again, we really want to make sure we're bringing the right student to that program. So we do know that it's a tight window. We will certainly be very responsive as we go into this next phase of sharing out those decisions, knowing that we are on a tight timeline.
All right, and stay with me. I have another question. All right, so let's say one student in a family is selected for the virtual learning program and the siblings aren't. Does this mean that some students will be in a virtual learning program and their siblings will be in the in-person learning environment?
So it's a great question, and we are certainly looking at siblings as part of the decision. However, again, I do need to emphasize that really and truly the criteria has to do with eligibility determined by sort of the academic performance of how well a student did in that environment and how the attendance was. And so you could have a situation where one child in your family just did terrific and another one did not. And in the case of the student who did not do well, we want to bring that student back, because most important for us is for us to make sure we're meeting the needs of our students. And so some students, a very small group actually, I wanted to really name that. It's a small group that actually can thrive in that virtual setting. Most of our students are so much better served by coming back in person. So there could be instances where one of your children do qualify and match for the program and another doesn't. And that's why we want to provide the option that if a family decides it's actually better for them all to come back in person, that will be that decision for a family to make.
All right, thank you a lot, Chief Dabrowski. Guys, we're nearing the end. We're in the home stretch. So we're going to answer a few more questions, try to answer some in the comment section, and we'll see where the evening takes us. I don't know who can take this next question. When I get in this type of environment, I tend to go with the Chief of Staff first, but Chief Dabrowski, I see you on camera, so maybe this one's for you as well. Will teachers follow students from classroom to classroom, or will students go from classroom to classroom? Yeah, that's a little bit, I don't think you're the right content expert for that. Here's the Chief of School.
There's Chief Davis.
No, for the most part, students are going to travel from class to class. If there might be a school or two that wants to move their teachers, but I think that's going to be rare. It's going to be mostly the schedule as normal that we've been used to.
All right, Chief Davis, nice and succinct. I appreciate that. All right, guys, we are nearing the end of our event. However, I know there are a lot of questions out there, and I know some folks feel like their questions aren't being answered here on camera. Remember, at the beginning of the event, we shared that we'll try to answer some of these questions live on camera, but many of them, due to the volume, we're going to have to answer in the comment sections on the space. We'll continue to work on that between now and this time tomorrow, and I'm confident we're going to make a great deal of progress in answering those questions. Some of them are easy, some of them are hard, but we're here to answer both. We're your school district. Thank you all for coming out and joining us. We want to talk a little bit about the Reconnect, Restore, Reimagine reopening effort. I'm glad we did. I think we're great. We were pretty successful. At the same time, we know for a lot of you, you're looking at what's right in front of you, and that's August 30th, and that means your student returning to school. We want to make certain that we're giving you the best information possible so you can make a great decision, so you understand what's happening. If you have health and safety questions, if you want to know our plan, if you want to download an infographic that helps explain what we're doing, visit the website, baltimorecityschools.org. Again, baltimorecityschools.org. Click the blue button right under the pretty picture of the student that says health and safety. It'll take you to the webpage with the plan. We just updated on the 10th yesterday, so you're getting hot off the press the best plan. We're continuing to update the website nearly daily to make certain that we're giving you everything that you need to be prepared. If you've got back to school questions, go to the same website, baltimorecityschools.org. Click the back to school section. We're uploading the family calendar, hopefully this week, the family guide, the code of conduct, other means, forms that we'll need you to fill out. We're working on that now. Take time to do that. And if you have questions about Reconnect, Restore, Reimagine, this plan is terribly important to the work that we're going to use to help students not only grow from where we were at during the pandemic, but to excel and to be their best selves. Visit our website, www.baltimorecityschools.org. We'll do our best to keep that page updated. We made quite a few changes yesterday. I think we're going to make some more in the coming days, even add an infographic if we're lucky, and we'll see where we're going. But in the meantime, we're happy you came out, both on Facebook and on YouTube. I am your Director of Communications, Andre Riley. On behalf of our CEO, Dr. Sonia Brookins Santelises, her leadership team, and what I feel is the best staff in the state, including the best communications department in the state. Thank you for joining us. We'll send you out a copy of this if you receive our emails, and we'll go from there. Have a great evening. And remember, school starts on August the 30th. We can't wait to see you. Have a good one.
Thanks, Andre.